Hey guys!
Welcome back to Tribe Talk Tuesday.
And today's episode is an exciting episode. Woo. We are going to freaking nerd out today and talk everything comic books, which I'm super, super excited for. And we have a special guest. We have Vivian. Hey. Say hi, Vivian.
Hi. This is awkward.
Awkward.
Who gave us permission to have a special guest?
I gave us permission. So, since today's topic is about comic books, I decided to bring Vivian along, who's one of my bestest friends.
Word.
Word. Yeah, we met during our MSU days. Red Hawks.
It's okay, you can expose our age because we already exposed that.
Yeah, so when Viv and I met, we connected on comic books. And we started talking about like Batman and random shit. So she is a big comic nerd too, like me. So I was like, who better to have here if we're talking about comics than Vivian?
Yeah. Oh, you should tell that story, like how you guys actually
met
and actually interacted because of comics.
Okay, this was a long time ago.
It's a little bit, rated R.
Was it rated R?
Because my eyes are up here, not down there.
What?
You remember how we met, do you?
Ooh, the tea.
Wait, no, it was okay. So it was after school.
It was raining.
It was
really
pouring
hard.
rain. Right? This sounds like it's gonna get real sexy. Okay.
It's not. Sorry.
It was pouring rain, and we were waiting for the train, and the train was delayed, and Viv was there with some other people, and I was just standing there. And how did we start talking? I remember you had that Batman belt.
Yeah, we were talking about how bad the trains were, and the power lines were out at that point. And then Angie looked down at my belt, and I was just like, my eyes are up here.
Right. I looked down at her belt, because she had the Batman belt on, and I was like, oh, dope. I was like, your belt's really cool. And she's like, yeah, I love Batman. And then...
I like Batman. Well, thanks to Batman.
Batman brought us together.
Yeah.
But, so we started talking, and... we went on the train. That was pretty much it. And then we ended up finding out we had a class together. And
stats.
Then, stats. We're not going to go there.
No, that was bad.
But, so we saw each other in class. I was like, oh shit, I remember you from the train station. You're like, yeah, I remember you too. And then it was just like love at first sight.
Oh, you're cute. Oh. She made me skip classes. That was the first time I ever did that.
Wow. I never did that. I was like such a good student.
Yeah. They'd be like, oh, you know what? Let's go have lunch. Food. Okay, let's go have lunch.
Do you want to go to class? I don't want to go to class. No, I never did that.
I remember you guys also mentioned, you guys go to comic shop too, right?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
So, Viv and I would take the train together, and we discovered this comic shop that conveniently was right next to the train station. And we walked in there one day, and we're just, let's check it out. And then from then on, we literally went there every day.
Yeah.
And
it was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. We spent a lot of money on comics.
Yeah, but they gave us 10% off, so
Right, they always give us a discount. Shout out to Fortress of Solitude in Newark. Tell them Angie sent you.
Discount code 10% off.
No, it was awesome. We would be there for hours. Even before we catch a train to school, we'll go to Fortress, or after school we'd go to Fortress, and we would come out with bags of comic books.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
It was so bad.
They had a big selection though. I mean, they still do. And it was good. It was a mix of regular comics, and they had graphic novels. I bought a lot of graphic novels.
Yeah.
I probably have at least 50 right now.
Well, we started with
Fables, yeah.
Fables was one of our big ones during that time. And it was
Fables?
A lot. Go, you talk about Fables. That's
you can think of...
Before you guys talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know anything about comics. This will be very interesting.
Yeah, just keep asking questions.
keep asking questions.
Yeah,
if you
perfect.
guys don't hear too much of my voice, it's because I'm listening just like you are. So, Vivian, what is Fables?
Please enlighten our listeners. Well, actually, I don't know it either, so...
Oh, you guys would really like it.
It's so good.
It's like the Brothers Grimm's version of fairy tales. So, you guys know the show Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
It's Once Upon a Time's take on this comic, even though this one is a little bit better and darker.
Oh, so much better.
Yeah, so, the whole story is that, all these fairy tale people, they had their own world that they lived in, and all these trolls started to invade and attack their homelands, and they got into this crazy war. So, all the fairy tale, creatures and the people that decided, that they didn't want to live here anymore and they wanted to, be safer, they moved to New York. And they had all these witches, kind of do, a magic spell, so that there was, one section of New York that they all lived in. It was, a building.
Yeah.
Typical New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like an empty parking lot.
Yeah, people didn't know, it was there.
Yeah. And the main character is Big B Wolf, the big bad wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's,
My boy.
he's... I don't even know how to explain him. He's, a rehabbed evil person that is good now because he's a detective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's very conflicted. It's kind of
It's like
I guess he could kind of like a Punisher type version, but he was
It was like a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. So,
he was good, but not so good.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Can we
But
do
he
a
was-
spoiler about if you're gonna read
Well,
it?
spoiler alert! If you're gonna read Fables,
Yeah.
don't listen to this.
He ends up falling in love with Snow White.
Yeah.
Which no one really anticipates, because back in the fairy tale world, he was still evil. He remained in his big bad wolf form, and Snow White got captured, and he started sniffing her at some point, and she's like, "The fuck, dude?" And he was like, "Oh, sorry, I don't know." And eventually he realized that he had a thing for her, and it was kind of imprinting, but they didn't know this until they got into New York, and he started spending more time with her, and
Yeah. Well,
Crazy
if
story.
anybody, if anyone's ever played the game Wolf Among Us, the Telltale game Wolf Among Us is based off of that comic series, Fables.
Yeah.
So if anyone's played that, then that's pretty much what Fables is.
Yeah.
So, that was one of our first big, series that we read together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to know, because I didn't know it was a series. I thought it was a term for comics or something.
Well, it was.
Yeah, because I was like, what's Fable? And
It's
then you start
literally, how
telling
many
a story, I'm
how
like,
many
oh,
trades
shit.
is there for Fables?
Well, I think there's at least 30.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So it ended at issue 150.
Wow.
Right, so each issue is a small little booklet. It's probably roughly maybe 20 pages. So there's 150 of them. And the very last comic that they ever did, and it was the end of the story, it was a huge book. Because they did the story, and then they included
Side stories.
Side stories, what happened after the main story. And it was a lot of artwork and little history lessons about each character and stuff like that.
I have a question. So you guys mentioned earlier about graphic novel. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel? Because I've seen the ones the hardcover ones. I don't know if that's considered a comic book, or comics are the soft one.
Well, yeah, I the trades are usually pretty much all of they'll do a certain amount of comics, the single issues.
Yeah.
And then after about probably maybe 12 issues or less, and it depends on the comic and the company or whatever. They'll kind of put them all together in a trade. So it's
Which
the
is the hard
thicker,
book.
which are the hard ones. So it's all of those issues in one. But there are graphic novels, which is pretty much a big comic book, essentially.
I mean, sometimes people use them interchangeably.
Yeah.
They're kind of similar. It's a graphic novel, or a trade is essentially a compilation of if it's Superman issue 1 through 5, it's in that. And it's for some people it's easier to get a trade, especially if you're trying to catch up. It's a little bit cheaper to get a trade versus getting single issues that cost maybe $4,
Right.
but you get a trade that has 5 issues and it's $20
Yeah.
per se.
That's the thing. With comics, you will spend so much money and it's hard to kind of keep up because there's always a new issue, either every 2 weeks or most every 2 weeks, every month or something, and it's it got to a point where it got kind of hard to always go to the comic shop. Every time we would go to the comic shop, because they would have a box for us where they would hold the specific issues that we would read, and we would come back and there'd be piles of comics. So it got to the point where most of the time we just waited for the trades to come out. So we might as well just buy the trades and kind of just read it all together.
So how do you know when a new story comes out, I guess.
So, I mean, there's different ways to know. Our comic shop, so they have a table, right, as soon as you walk in, and those are the new issues that came out for that week. And then on the wall, they have, like, shelves, and it's, like, current issues, but they came out already. And above that, they have this this little booklet, and it'll tell you what is coming out that week for that section. But it's a little bit complicated, but and comics are weird too because they'll say that, you know, if it's supposed to come out on a particular date, somehow it gets delayed, whether it's because of the company or they just had a whole different media plan for it, and it'll keep getting delayed, and you don't always know when they're supposed to come out.
So where's like the media part, I guess? Because I know I've never. I mean, not that I'm looking for it either, but I've never seen talks about it. I guess you kind of have to be in the circle to know.
In the nerd community.
Yeah.
It's I mean, yeah.
Twitter.
Twitter, or like if you follow like certain, like if you do like Midtown Comics or even just like Marvel, DC, or whatever company you're reading. Like I read Saga. So, like, Image Comics and stuff like that. So, sometimes they'll post up, new issue this day, or is coming out this time, pre-order, or whatever. Or sometimes you just go into, like, websites, like comic book websites. Or at comic shops, they usually have newsletters. And, like, those newsletters usually have when all of these issues are coming out. So, you kind of just have to know how to keep up with them.
Yeah, it's not easy.
So, like, for, let's say, like, you know, for some of the listeners who might be interested to actually start reading comics, where do you even start? Because, you know, I feel like there's so much comics out there. There's so many series. There's so many different stories. I mean, I know I follow a couple of, like, you know, like, Marvel or, like, DC kind of account on Instagram, and I always see them posting about, like, new series on this and new series on that, but I was like, I'm so confused because like there's so many series going on.
Yeah.
How, if I'm a person who wants to get started reading comics, like where do I begin?
Well, I can kind of tell you how I like started getting into comics. Like I was always into. Well, I didn't really read comics until maybe a little bit after high school, honestly. So I was like a late bloomer, but I was always like into like Batman and like the Batman animated series and X-Men and all that stuff. So I was always very curious about like comic books. I just never I was never in like what's the word I'm looking for?
Like the community of it?
I just never really knew how to access it. I never went to like a comic shop until I kind of decided, you know what, I want to go check it out. So I didn't know where to start either. That was kind of like one of my things too. I was like, oh my god, there's so many things to read. Like, where do I start? Like, when it comes to like DC and Marvel, there's so much stuff.
There is a lot.
There's a lot.
It's
like
overwhelming.
And like background stories, because it's years and years of stories. But sometimes you kind of just find like there's always a bunch of different stories. There's always different storylines, and I kind of started with like the newer stuff at the time. And then I kind of ended up doing like my own research eventually and kind of looking into characters that I was interested in. Like, I started reading with like Harley Quinn comics when Harley Quinn first came out with her, well, she didn't come out, but when they came out with her series for DC, I started with her because it was new, so I could start from like issue 1, and I was always a huge Harley Quinn fan. Since like she came out in the animated series, so I kind of started with her, and then I started getting more into comics and more into like Batman and Constantine, Green Arrow, like those characters I was really interested in. I kind of ended up doing my own research myself on them. Obviously, I can't keep up with all of the comics. It's a lot of fucking comics.
Yes.
So sometimes you just have to Wikipedia.
Well, that's actually like good to know that like you can, you know, I guess like focus on like one character, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can pick up on like a story that you think you want to start from, because I think that's what's overwhelming is that there's so much history when it comes to comics that like I feel like people might certainly think like, oh, do I have to go all the way back from the beginning to understand what's going on right now? And it's kind of good that like yes, like you maybe would start
Yeah.
on like wherever you want to start, and then if you eventually want to explore the other history of
Right.
it, then you can go back and stuff.
Right.
But I think there's also like internet too, so you can also find little details
Right.
and stuff.
Yeah.
So when there is like a comic that's already been that you started a while ago, but then you just
Stop.
like to read a certain story, do you have to know other stories to get it, or is each like is
It,
each one
it
depends.
things?
It depends.
Yeah,
like some
that's
people do like was it like annual issues, and they do like some side stories
Yeah.
or like intros to specific stories.
So if you start a new story, for the most part, they'll always give you like a really small summary of that character, so you kind of get the general gist of what the storyline's going to go about. And there's a lot of different retellings of different stories and different characters. So one character from the 1950s might have these qualities, and then it's 2019 and they may have different qualities, but it's still some of what the original content was.
But it's also not just Marvel and DC. I feel like everyone feels
Like that's the
like
two
those
major
are the
ones.
two. Well, yes, they're the two
Yeah.
biggest ones. Yes, Marvel and DC. But if you're also one starting off reading comics, like go check out some indie stuff. Like you can find a lot of good stories there, and it's not as long and as DC and Marvel, and kind of start off there and see what happens and how you like it, and then kind of explore other options and speak to the people at the comic shops, man. They know a lot and they can help you out. Let them know what you're into.
Yeah, if you like reading books, it's kind of the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you're a fantasy person and you like darker things, you can tell them that and they'll give you really good recommendations.
I have to say that Fables one sounds pretty interesting.
Oh, it's
You
great.
would like it.
I was
You
gonna
would
say, like,
totally
Burn.
like
Oh my
it.
God, I love Fables.
Yeah, you
It's
would
such a
love
good
it.
story.
It's so good.
do you
It's
have
very
Fables,
fantasy.
Vivian?
She does.
I do. I have all the issues.
Oh.
I have all the trades too, so you can read them book by book.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really good. You would totally like it because you're into like fantasy stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, check it out. Check out Fables. Really good. Highly recommend it.
It's kind of weird. I was a late bloomer too. I didn't start
Yeah.
reading comics until I was freshman year in college. And it was kind of weird because I started thinking about it and I realized that, when I was growing up, I watched all the animated shows. I watched Batman. Like, I really love The Crow, even though I
Yeah.
shouldn't have because
Amazing
it's
movie.
kind of a really dark story for a little kid to watch. But I kind of realized that no one ever told me, comics exist. Why don't you
Yeah.
just try reading one?
Yeah.
I never knew they existed. I didn't know it was a thing. And it never really connected in my head that, crap, there's comic shops. And I watched The Simpsons, too, and they always go to the comic book shop. I never thought to, try to find one myself.
Wait, Simpsons is a comic?
No,
No.
like in Simpsons.
No,
they
like in
show,
The
an
Simpsons, they would
episode.
go to like,
Oh.
Yeah, but they have comics.
but they do have comics.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Like, now we're getting to the age where, there's comics for everything, which isn't
Yeah.
bad. It's just, a new thing. But, yeah, so, the very first time we went to Fortress was the very first time I went to a comic book shop. And I just remember being so overwhelmed because
Wait, that was the first time you went to a comic shop?
I think so.
Fortress?
No, it wasn't. We went somewhere else.
Wait, but it was with me?
It was my
I feel
first-
so special.
Yeah, my first comic experience was with you.
Oh my god.
But,
Keep popping everybody's cherry.
Yes,
I know.
bitch. Wow. Why did I know that? Or did I know that and I just don't remember?
I don't think you remember.
Oh, okay.
But Fortress was, I forgot where we went previously. But
I think it was in Montclair.
oh, it was Warp Comics.
Yes.
Was not a fan. But we went to Fortress and I didn't know what to read because I was just like, well, I grew up with Batman. Maybe I should read something Batman. But then I saw all these Batman stories on the table and I just got so overwhelmed I didn't know what to do. So then I just kept walking down and then I picked up this book called The Valiant.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what was about that book, but then on the I guess the cover page, it was Bloodshot, which he is kind of like a modern day
Her favorite.
Frankenstein, not anymore. But he's like a modern day Frankenstein and he's a government built project and he just goes around and does all these crazy military based missions, but he doesn't die because he has nanites in his body. And then there's a ninja on there and then a blonde girl.
Ninjax. My favorite.
Yeah, and then there is a guy with a hood on. He looked like he was from the Ice Age, and I was like, you know what? The artwork looked really good. Let me just buy it and see what happens. And that's kind of what started my comic obsession. and that's how I got into Valiant. It's just like, for me, it's just like, I love DC and I love Marvel, but you know that they make a lot of money. So all these smaller comic book companies,
right.
they want to focus more on the story to get people to read it more. Even though, like, the illustration is great and everything, but, you know, that's what kind of captured me about Valiant. And I went on this crazy money binge, which I shouldn't have, but I bought all these Valiant comics, and I read through everything, and I fell in love.
Yeah. So you should see, like, me and Viv, we go to, like, Comic-Con together every year. And every time, like, the Valiant booth is there, Vivian would literally come out with, like, bags and bags.
It got to the point where they knew who I was. They were like, oh, I remember you from last year. I'm
literally,
like, yeah.
Like, we would go to the panels, and we would go to the booth, and they would already know, like, we got you, girl. Yeah. Well, actually, since we're bringing up Valiant.
Yeah, it was a good thing I didn't.
Yeah,
This is sad, actually.
So, I'm going to bring up something that's going to piss her off, but...
Yeah.
Vin Diesel, Vivian. We're going to be...
Maybe that's not the company's fault.
She's
about to go.
Alright, so, we're about to, like, get schooled right now in Valiant. So, they started as a company in the early 1990s, and then in 1994, I believe it's 1994, they went through bankruptcy. Right, and at that time, the CEO, his name is Dinesh Shamdasani, he was working in Universal in Hollywood. And he was like, wow, I grew a Valiant. Let me try to, like, you know, buy the rights for the company. Let me try to get the company. And he bought it for, like, under $1 million. So he spent, like, 10 years, and he created this team, and they were just trying to get copyrights for every single character, everything they possibly could, so they could finally own it again. And then they did. And they started rolling out all these comics in the early 2010s.
Yeah, so, like, fairly... new.
Yeah, they're still fairly new, and they got this great, huge following because their whole thing was that they were always about the story. The illustration was great and everything. They found great artists, but they always found people who were passionate about it, not people just doing it to try to, you know, get more money out of it. Which I feel like sometimes bigger publishers do that. They do it for cash grabs, which, I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but, you know, Valiant they cared so much, and it was great. And then, because, like, you know, Dinesh still has, you know, pull in Universal because he used to work there as a producer, they decided, you know, we're going to make a Bloodshot movie. I love Bloodshot so much, and I'm probably going to end up getting mad and cry about it.
Don't cry.
But
it's not an emotional podcast.
I'm sorry, but it's sad, like, you know, the history of what happened recently.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so Bloodshot, like I mentioned before, he's like a modern-day Frankenstein. He was a military project. And they don't really know what his full story is. There's, like, different variations of Bloodshot, and now there's different types of Bloodshot, where they're military soldiers from different eras of different wars. But the whole thing is that they have nanites in their body, and the nanites are kind of like computers in their head. And they can go into all these crazy missions, you know, get shot at, get stabbed, get blown up, but as long as they get protein into their bodies, they'll regenerate. So they were going to make a movie about it, and Jason David Frank, he played Bloodshot.
It was a YouTube series.
It was a YouTube series from Bat in the Sun.
Series. Yeah.
And Bat in the Sun is known for superhero beatdowns. So it will be like, you know, Batman versus Superman fighting each other, who would win, and they do all these great sequences with it. But, you know, Bat in the Sun made that. It was great. Everyone thought that Jason David Frank was going to play, you know, the movie version. And then fucking Vin Diesel got it.
Of course, Vin Diesel, because, well, they're trying to make money.
Right.
I mean, if they got Jason David Frank, people would have known him from Power Rangers.
Right, like,
you know?
he's such a...
And that's the thing, like, he fit into the Valiant family because he was so passionate about it. He read all the comics. He bought, like... he bought the comics that were thousands of dollars just to have them because he was so devoted to the character.
He like promote.
Yeah, and I think at some point he was supposed to play the character, and then Sony just changed their minds.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, like, Vin Diesel, like, he's a good Bloodshot in the exterior, but not, like, acting wise. Mm-hmm. You know, but yes.
I guess it's like the sucky thing about when comics become money machines.
Yeah,
right.
They just try and get people that will get them some money.
Yeah, and it's sad, you know, because Jason David Frank would have been great. He played a great Bloodshot in the web series.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can go on for like hours and hours talking about like the movies and how certain companies have effed up certain characters.
This is fair.
Oh, bitch, I can go on forever for that, but like. It's just it's so frustrating though. I think that's what it is about like comics, when you can visually see something and you see how everything's supposed to be, and then a movie comes and they just completely change the story and the character, and it's just like so disappointing.
Yeah.
Is there like one movie that came out, Marvel DC, that like totally went against?
Oh my god.
No. You want me to say it? I'll say it. She's gonna get mad. Suicide Squad was terrible.
God.
That was like nothing to do with
Suicide
any
Squad
comics?
broke my heart. It broke my heart.
It kind of, well, I mean,
Like, not how it was made, or like, I understand they went like with like a neon theme and everything.
No, it has even nothing to do with the colors. It's just the story,
Like, the
and the
storyline.
characters,
Yeah.
and it was just
it contradicted like
horrible.
everything in the comic series and each individual character in the comic series.
Yeah, I mean the only maybe semi-accurate one was what's his face?
The Sergeant?
No, Boomerang.
Oh yeah, I guess Boomerang.
He was the only one who he seemed semi, like, his character was semi, like, even though
Waller
I didn't
was
like
good.
the bromance between him and Deathshot.
Yeah.
So,
Amanda Waller was good too.
yeah, she played a good Amanda
But
Waller.
everyone else is just like a hot mess of, let's try to figure out what these characters would have been like.
Right. And let's not even go into Harley Quinn, because I
yeah,
go
she
on
would
a
go on for
big
days
old
about that.
rant about that bitch. But go ahead.
So because, I mean, you know, every time like a superhero movie comes out, there's always that like reactions like, oh, they didn't follow the comics, this is not what it should be, blah blah blah. How do you keep comics readers then keep on reading comics when like they like fuck up so much shit? Like it's already hard enough to get into comics, and then you get into comics, you get invested to this, and then they like ruin it.
Right.
So like, how do you keep yourself like invested into like even, you know?
I mean, obviously, like, not all these movies are gonna go specifically how the comic book went. Like, we know that. Like, I'm not expecting the movie to be exactly like the comic book. It's just like if you're reading a book and they come out with a movie, it's not gonna be exactly like the book. However, it's when they do things with the intentions of only making money and not really thinking about the story and the characters that frustrate me. Like, for example, with like Avengers and the whole Marvel series, I feel like a lot of that didn't go exactly how the comics went, but they still like they did like the characters justice for the most part.
Yeah, they
But,
respected the characters for
But
that.
with like DC, they're like trying to compete so hard with Marvel when it comes to like the cinematic movies that they rush the stories, and the stories are just all over the place, and it just makes no sense. It's like, why can't you just be like the DC animated movies? Like, go off of that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, do you guys feel a certain type of way when, obviously, yeah, like, not a lot of people are invested into comics, not a lot of people are reading it, and so, like, you're being so supportive that, like, you know, you want to support these companies, you're going to read their comics, blah, 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 and then down the line, they, like, screwed the movie like that, as if, like, they didn't even consider the fact to kind of, like, fan-serving the people who actually supported it from the beginning. Like, do you feel a certain way, then?
I do feel a certain way, because there's characters that you're just so attached to, and then when they kind of just butcher them and act like, it's okay if their story goes like this, it's a little upsetting. Like, okay, we'll go to Harley Quinn right now. So, as you know, Harley Quinn is one of my all-time favorite characters. Mainly, like, old school Harley Quinn, not so much this new DC Harley Quinn. I don't know what the fuck they're doing with her story right now. But that's a whole different story. So when I found out that they were doing the Suicide Squad movie, A, I was super excited because I love the Suicide Squad series, like the comics. And B, I was like, oh yes. I was like, Harley Quinn, she's finally going to be in a movie. Like, I'm super excited. And then when they announced that Margot Robbie was playing her, I was still on board because the way she looks, like, yeah, I think she would look like a perfect Harley Quinn. Hopefully, you know, acting wise, she does her justice and the story does her justice. And I was super excited.
Well, okay, let's be clear. Like, a large part of Harley Quinn is her voice.
Yes.
Right, because she's from New York.
New York.
And, you know, she has that typical New York accent, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, Margot Robbie had that in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
And in interviews, she was saying that she had a voice coach so that she could try to perfect it.
Right. And it wasn't.
It wasn't. Right, that's the main thing.
But that's the main, yes. Her voice was the main the main thing. But then also her story on Suicide Squad, I just did not like it at all. I felt like they made her try way too hard. Then the whole love story between her and the Joker was just so cheesy.
Yeah, they romanticized the crap out of it.
They romanticized. I'm like, that's not at all how their relationship is. And then now that they're doing this whole Harley Quinn movie, and they're doing it with the freaking Birds of Prey, which that's another thing, because another one of my favorite characters.
We're about to have a podcast part 2.
That's another thing. Another one of my favorite characters in Birds of Prey, which is Black Canary. We're not going to go into that.
We not? Yeah, we
but,
can. That's going to be another.
It's just, I feel like it's going to ruin the story there too. I'm like, I don't understand why they have to make Harley Quinn such a big part of that story. Like, if they want a separate Harley Quinn movie, do like a Gotham City Sirens movie, you know? Not a Birds of Prey movie. But anyway, yes. To go back to Bolt's question, I do get a little disappointed when they kind of ruin the story of, like, a character that I loved and I've kept up with for so long. Because he's like, you have these expectations and you're just so excited. Yes, they never put Harley Quinn in a movie. And now she's finally going to be in a movie. I'm so excited. And then they just fuck it up.
I mean, it's going to sound silly, but, like, as we read comic books and we see, like, movies that come out, you know that, all right, so Marvel created this plan, right? And they kind of revamped comic movies, because before then, you know, it was The Dark Knight with Christopher Nolan, but that really wasn't a Batman movie. It was like a different type of story.
Yeah. So
Marvel already, like, implements plan. Their plan works. They have, like, a certain plot formula, whatever. And DC just was like, oh my god, we need to hurry the fuck up. Yeah. And it's hard because then, like, you know, they'll say, the directors and producers say that, you know, we did so much research about the character, we'll go into their comic history, but you can clearly tell they didn't. The only movie DC has so far that has, like, kind of, like, gotten most of everything right and has appreciated the character is Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, yeah.
They did a really good job with Wonder Woman. And, you know, you kind of get disappointed, but you also go in, like, hoping, you know, maybe this one's going to be good.
Yeah.
Doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
So, 2-part question.
Okay.
I don't really know. So how, like, when they do make a movie with, like, Marvel or DC or whatever, they obviously need the rights from the person that owns the stories, right?
It depends. So with DC and Marvel, because they're so big, they most likely have the rights for all the characters under, like, that company.
Mm-hmm.
So the person or team that writes the stories and does the illustrations are kind of, like, on board with the movie or not?
Well, they're part of the company itself. I think if you're writing these comics, if you're a DC Comics writer or illustrator, you're part of the DC company.
Well, that's the thing.
Right.
When when they do these movies, they don't stick to one specific storyline, and every comic issue is different. Depending on the series. Like, one series would be written by one specific writer and illustrated by one specific illustrator. Yeah. And another series would be from a different writer. It's not always the same writer and not always the same illustrator.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, in the middle of the story, they'll switch writers or they'll switch illustrators for various reasons.
The writer kind of, like, they're not, like, part of the movie, right? Like, the movie people kind of just take the story away.
Sometimes they can be.
Yeah. But for the most part, it used to always be, like, Stan Lee, because Stan Lee was such, like, a big he's pretty much helped to start like the popularity of comic books, you know, when he created a lot of characters.
Spider-Man and all that.
Spider-Man, and
you know, sometimes the writers are included into it because, you know, like, obviously, like, some of these directors and producers don't know much about the storyline. So they'll ask writers, hey, by the way, can you tell us, like, a summary about this character and things like that? And they'll kind of compile them together and then create their own version, which, you know, obviously isn't always accurate, but sometimes it fits better because a movie is 2.5 hours long versus, like, you making it into, like, a TV series or whatever. Like, One Piece, I could go on for, like, 500 episodes and still keep going.
So then my second question is, has there ever been a time where a movie came out and then, like, the comics kind of played off the movie?
Yeah.
So, like, the illustrations became from the movie?
Yeah, that happened. That happened with Doctor Strange.
Does that
Yeah, with
bother
Doctor
you?
Strange, and that
Yeah.
happened with Suicide Squad too.
Yeah, they do that to kind of like, grab onto like, the people who watch the movies, but
Yeah,
they're
so
not
they
really
can
into
read the
comics,
comics.
because then they'll see it. It's more like synonymous. Yeah, so it happens a lot, and they do that for TV shows and
Right.
movies too. Like any TV show and movie, it doesn't have to be a comic specific one.
That's actually what I was about to say. You've seen Penny Dreadful,
No.
right? No, you've never. Okay,
I've heard of it.
Okay, so there's this show, Penny Dreadful, and it was canceled after the third season. Yeah, I think it was canceled after the third season. However, they did continue it through comic series. So with that, like people who were so obsessed with the show and who were so upset the show was canceled, now they have, if they want to keep up and catch up, because it was like a continuation from where it ended to now. So now that's like incentive for people to go and read comics, because now it's in a comic series. So if you want to know more about what's going on, you read the comic books. So like yeah, companies do that where they make comic adaptations of shows, movies, or they'll change it. Like again with Suicide Squad, they changed some of the newer stories were based off of the Suicide Squad movie, like kind of like the theme, not that specific story in general, but just kind of like the theme and even the illustrations. There were some Harley Quinn illustrations that was based off of the Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad, which I hated, but again, it's okay. Whatever.
Yeah, sometimes they will change like what the character originally looked like to like what the movie version is,
so people can read it,
relate to it.
Yeah, like Doctor Strange was a great one. Like that was a great movie.
Oh my god,
that was really really good.
Yes.
I go watch that one.
Yes.
You should.
That
it's
was
really good.
That's a thing. Like I love.
I'm a cumber snatch.
That's
That's what they call themselves.
Yeah,
but
like
you played it really well.
Cumber Snatch.
Yeah, Cumber Snatch. Cumber Snatch. Yeah, but like I love comics like that. I love comics that include like fantasy and magic and stuff like that. Like Justice League Dark.
Sames.
It's like one of my favorite series because it's like very magic based and very dark with like Constantine, because I love Constantine, Zatanna.
I mean, there is a character named Katana.
Yeah, but not Katana. Zatanna. But yeah, I love stories like that. It's just so magical. And like when you see like the Doctor Strange comics, even just the movie in general, it's just so
if you really
so
like
much
magic based things, Doctor Strange is a really good movie to watch, because it changes your perception of reality is, right? Because you'll see like worlds upside down, and it's like this really weird, like kind of like you're on LSD but you're not. It's a really good mix of colors to see.
So this is probably a stupid question, but
there's no stupid questions.
Comics always have drawings in them, right? There's no like long pages of just words,
right?
Like a book
Yeah.
doesn't really have pictures. So this one is like pictures,
right?
But it's like more of a dialogue than like a description.
Correct. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like they'll have like the little boxes where it describes like the scene or what's going on, action stuff going on, but it's usually like little boxes on like the side.
Yeah, you'll never see like 5 paragraphs on like one page.
Right.
Okay.
All of it is in the illustration of it, and it's always the littlest things that the illustrators draw and like whatever they pencil and color in.
Well, I guess that's like, I have to like the drawing.
Totally.
Oh yeah, artist is always like a really big thing too, because I've noticed with certain comics, like the story seems interesting and I'll look at like the drawings and how it looks, how the illustration looks, and I'm just like, this doesn't really stand out to me. Like I remember one big series that I'm really into is Saga, which I know it's pretty popular. A lot of people have read it. When I first saw like the illustration for Saga, I was like, oh my god, it's so nice. And I feel like that caught my attention more than the story. And then once I started reading it, I was like, wow, the story is like really, really good too. So the illustration, I feel like illustration is a big part too of what people look for when they select.
Yeah, it's very psychological too, because Saga is kind of like, it's Romeo and Juliet, but
So good.
in a sci-fi type of world.
Yeah.
Right, and they're different species. They're not supposed to be together, and there's this huge war over it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's a lot bloodier. There's a lot of gore, a lot of death that happens.
Yes,
but
it's definitely not for children.
no,
so.
do not let your kids read it because you'll see like
a lot of graphic stuff up
you'll
in
see
there.
boobs and penises everywhere.
Yeah.
But the way that they drew it is really interesting because it's such a dark story. But a lot of the
But
colors
it's so
they use,
bright and
yeah, a lot of the colors they use are like pastel colors, so you
Yeah.
kind of get this relaxed feeling. And it kind of tricks your mind because you're reading through it and you're like, oh, okay, maybe nothing bad is going to happen. Bam, someone dies.
and then you start crying. You're like, no,
Yeah.
why? Yeah, it's very Game of Thrones-esque too. Like when
It
they
is.
start killing characters.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different story.
So when it comes to comics, I feel like I'm slightly contradicting myself because I'm an artist. When I'm like looking at the illustration, I just can't form like a story from it. And it's either like I'm looking at the illustration or like I'm trying to read through like the words. So I think like a little bit like maybe why some people can't get into comics is because it's either like you're a book reader where you're just skimming through the words, or like you're you're focusing on like the illustration or something like that. It's a bit weird to kind of focus on like the word and then you're looking at the illustration and you're like kind of formulating the story. Also, I think in a sense too, it's like, okay, if you're a book reader, you're skimming through the words, and then if you're a visual person, I guess my mind automatically goes to like animated series or like movies that I can't imagine like the illustration like interacting while I'm reading. So it's a little bit
Got
like,
it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is, funny, because I was just going to say that. Like, I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off, but, like, the Batman and Robin comics and stuff, I can appreciate the art, but I feel like there's just so much of it going on that I don't like it, where, like, as, like, books, you can kind of picture it in your head. So that's why, like, if I were to read a comic, I think I'd have to really love the illustrations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then, I don't know, it'll be, like, a good two-way thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's something that you kind of have to get used to just because it's like it's kind of like a culture shock at first when you read it. And every story does it in a certain way. You know, like Batman is very dark. It's like based upon like all this crime. There's a lot of chaos going on. So that's kind of how the illustration is. Everything is super dark, so it makes you have to like really, really look at that picture just to see what's going on. Because in Batman, it's like always like the littlest things that you don't catch until later on. And you're like, oh shit. Like if I looked at that earlier, I would have realized that this was going to happen. But then there's other stories that it's a little bit more straightforward. And illustration is really important. Like there's abstract ones, and then there's like really crisp, colored ones. Like that's what I like. Yeah, totally. You'll be able to see the differences because every artist draws in a certain way.
Yeah.
And they're appreciated by that art.
Right, and that's what I love about like the comics. It's just to see everyone's like interpretation of like their characters pretty much come to life.
I guess the thing is like where I'm coming from is like, so I watch anime, which is I guess a Japanese version of like, but there's like, like mangas and stuff. I can't appreciate manga because it's like I'm reading it, I'm looking at the illustration, I'm looking at the drawings, but then like in my head it's like I would just want to watch a damn fucking show. Like I'd rather wait for the show where they're moving, you get voiceover, you get sound effects. I think when I'm trying to read like another reason why I can't get into comics, it's that like I'm looking for like the overall experience, and I think like when I read comics, I don't like, I'm trying to visualize what it's gonna look like, but then like I'm trying to put sound effects in my head, I'm trying to put like a voiceover in my head, I'm trying to like imagine these characters interacting. That's like I feel like it's overwhelming. Like I'd rather just like sit there and like actually watch it when it comes out in like an animated, if they decided to make it into an animation. But do you think that's why like people who are not into comics are having a hard time to get into comics? Well, because now we're like kind of like exposed to like movies and TVs and stuff that like people might automatically just assume like I'd rather have that kind of experience rather than like sitting in and reading comics.
Right, but it's also like if you're reading a book, like if you're reading a book, it's like you'd rather see it on TV or a movie of it, and it's it's kind of like
Well, I think
you're
it's
sitting
that-
there trying to
right.
figure out how everything's gonna
Yeah.
work out in your head.
Well, I think it's like the difference with books is that like books is like you can formulate the story in your head. Like there's no visual thing that they show you. Like this is what the characters look like. It's like the characters you built in your head based on the description, and I think also like the fact that like all like of course not all comics, but specifically like Marvel and DC, you've seen these characters moving in live movies and like TV series that it's just so hard to picture them in like such a 2D illustration when they're not moving. Versus like for books, you have you know if you're reading like a series in a book, you haven't really seen them outside the book, so you don't have like that expectation. But I feel like now that like you have this expectation about these characters, and then you're trying to get to the comics, I just feel like it's not the same experience.
Right. Yeah. Like because I just looked up Fable comics, which I guess that could formulate an opinion. I don't like the drawings.
And that's okay.
Yeah, which
but
is
the
fine.
story is amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were to, I think that's why I like books, because then I can make up what they look like in my head, like the characters and the setting and whatever. So now that I looked up Fables, I don't really like how they drew the people. I could appreciate that style of art. I just don't like it personally, but I probably would still read it because if the story is like about dark fables, I guess. That sounds interesting. But I think for a person that isn't into comics, I think at least for me, that's what pushes me away from comics is like
illustrations.
The illustration.
Right. I mean,
it is hard because like, there's been a lot of comics that people say are great, and I want to read them, and I just flip through it. I don't like the way it looks, so I'll just put it down.
Which is crazy because like as an artist, like as a creative person, you would think like, yes, I love that there's so much illustration.
That's why I was like I feel like I'm
too
contradicting
much.
myself because like you would think because I have like such an artistic mind that like if I see this illustration, my mind should automatically make these things move.
Like
but
it's great. There's like so much detail in these pictures.
Yes,
like
there
it looks
is.
amazing. It's just so much of it is like overwhelming.
Well, the thing is too, what I feel like, okay, when you're like reading a book, books are very detailed. So yes, they're gonna give you all that detail so you can kind of try to draw a picture in your head of what everything's supposed to look like. With comics, you don't get that detail because it's all drawn out for you. And for me, what I love about it, especially when it's like really good illustration, it's like I see the whole thing as I'm reading it, and it for me it's easier for me to get sucked into that world when I can visually see it in pictures. Don't get me wrong, I love reading books, and I love when books are like super detailed because then again it's easy for me to kind of envision what's going on in my mind and kind of create my own story. But with comics, I literally see it there. Like that's another reason why illustration is so important, because when you're reading a comic book, they're not going to sit there and describe everything to you. It's like if you're reading like Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings has everything like described. You can literally draw it out yourself and picture Mordor, you know? But with comic books, they don't do that. It's just a lot of dialogue. So you see everything there. So it's like when the illustration is really good and you can just kind of put yourself in the comic book. I'm weird. I do that. I'm like, I'm in here. Like and then I get mad into like the dialogue and like, oh shit, they're about to do this. Oh, it's about to get real. But so for me, that's why like illustration is really, really big. And that's why I love comic books, because I like to feel like I'm kind of there and I can see it already there.
Right, yeah. It seems like, if you like that, then you would like comics. I think like for me, I like being able to just imagine it myself.
Yeah.
Like seeing it drawn, then it's like stuck. Then it's like, no, that person has to look like that now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What?
I think for me too, like when I was like read comics, I mean I have like the X-Men series. I feel like my eyes like just visually likes to scoop the whole thing. So I can't focus on like each box because then my eyes are already on like the next page. So it's like I can't go like boop, 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 boop because then like my eyes are already seeing what's happening next.
Boop, boop, boop.
Yeah. So it's like I'm like trying to read here, but then like, oh my god, what happened here? So it's like I don't know how to explain it because like when you're reading a book, you're reading line by line, so you're not skimming through what's happening. But like when I'm reading a comics, like I see an illustration of like let's say fucking Storm like, you know, flying somewhere, and I'm like on the previous page right now,
Right,
like wait,
yeah.
what's going on over there? And then now you're like, I feel like my mind's always jumping when I'm like reading comics because I'm like, ooh, that illustration looks good. That looks good.
That's kind of how I read comics too.
Yeah.
Because
I
like,
think a lot of people do.
I spoil stuff for myself because I'm like, oh well, I'm on like, you know, this part, but then I look over, I'm like, oh my god, that person died. What the fuck did I do?
I just skipped like a whole big part.
Yeah, it's like the way that I read comics is kind of maybe it's different. I'm not sure if a lot of people do it this way, but you know, like I'll read through the dialogue as fast as possible. Then I go back and then look at the pictures and then like kind of like reattach the dialogue with the pictures to see if it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
like a puzzle.
Yeah, like I see it's really complicated how I read it. This is probably not the way to like, you know, get you guys into it, but it helps a little bit for me sometimes because I know that my eyes are just gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Right, that's something too. It's like there's always something new, like in a comic book. Like you're always, I guess, you're reading the story, and like there's always like a lot of symbolism. Like I know for me, okay, I'm a huge Coheed and Cambria fan. For those who don't know, it's a band, but they do their own comics, the Armory Wars, right? And those comics are. They're kind of intertwined with their music. So for me, when I'm reading their comics, a lot of the stuff that's in their music connects with their story. So for me, it's like I'm always like looking for little clues and hints and stuff like that. I mean, not every comic book is like that, but I feel like a lot of stories, there's always something hidden there that you didn't notice before, and you're just like, yeah, that makes sense. That's why this happened. So it's like kind of like a mystery, like a puzzle. You're like trying to figure it out.
That's like the good thing of comics is like a book, unless it's a series, which even a series will eventually end. It seems like comics just go on forever and ever.
They definitely
For the most
Yeah,
part.
yeah, for the most
Yeah.
part, yeah, definitely.
They definitely can. I mean,
Yeah.
like if one character's story ends, then they can show up in another character's story.
Yeah.
Kind of like as a cameo.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you get like little tidbits here and there, but they're not the main person in that story. So it kind of keeps like this strange continuity because then like, you know, when you start reading the other story, you're like, oh, I wonder when they're going to show up again. I want to know what happened last time.
Yeah.
Introduce.
So, listen, this conversation can go on for hours. I can literally sit here and have a conversation about
Yeah.
comic books for days. Me and
We
Vivian.
can have another one.
We can.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let us know if you want us to kind of go more into detail on maybe just stuff that we're into or specific stories or anything that you're interested in, because there's so much that you can talk about when it comes to like comic books and movies and things like that. So
Or maybe even like a recommendation of where you guys think the listeners should start in like a comics, you know, if they
Right.
want. Because I mean, we did mention that like, yeah, you can search online and like find
Right.
where you want to start, but maybe if they can't, even if they're struggling to do that,
Yeah.
maybe you guys have a
right, like
suggestion
this
to, like, start.
podcast is more like kind of
Like an intro to comics.
like an intro to comics, and us just wanting to talk about comics and something different and fun. But I actually just want to say the whole reason, well, besides that, I wanted to have a podcast about comic books in general, but the whole reason I wanted to do this specifically and have Vivian here was because I did see an article. As everyone knows, Stan Lee passed away, which was very hard to deal with. But there was an article about Bill Maher. Is that how you say his name? Bill Maher? Whatever. He had tweeted a bunch of stuff when Stan Lee passed away, and it was a lot of not so nice stuff, and it kind of really pissed me off because it felt like he was kind of judging people who are like, I guess, adults and who still read comics, and he just didn't understand why people made such a big deal about Stan Lee's death. And that kind of really rubbed me the wrong way because I am such a big comic book reader and comics are such a big part of my life, and I feel like it's helped me through a lot of stuff. So I took a lot of offense to that, and I felt like, okay, maybe we should talk about comic books and why we love it so much, so maybe other people who don't understand like what the big deal is about them would probably can kind of relate.
Yeah, and even
A little
aside
bit.
from that, you shouldn't feel ashamed about things that you like.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, like, a lot of people really don't consider comics like another art form, but it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy getting into the industry. There's so many writers, so many artists that try to get in, and you don't really, not many people can become successful
Right.
Right.
with it. And you spend your
Right.
whole life doing it, and, a lot of people start from when they're young. And it's kind of sad because it's an ignorant point of view of it. Because if you think about it, adults are the ones that draw these things, not little kids. If it were meant for little kids, then, younger kids would try writing them and things like that. Which there are comics for kids to get them started on things like this. But, comics, just like books, just like movies and shows, like, they have messages and there's a lot of symbolism in them. Sometimes they're used for political reasons.
And it's like, with like, Stan Lee, like, the whole reason he created, like, X-Men and stuff like that was to have people relate to characters. And, how mutants, like, people who feel like outsiders. And he created that for those people who did feel like outsiders so they could have a character that they could relate to. So I feel like it's just such... I don't know, people can relate to it in so many different ways, and I feel like to judge people for that is just so ignorant. And I just want to read a little bit of what he wrote so you guys can understand. So he's like, the guy who created Spider-Man and the Hulk has died, and America is in mourning. Deep, deep mourning for a man who inspired millions to, I don't know, watch a movie, I guess. I'm so incredibly grateful I lived in a world that included Stan Lee. Personally, I'm grateful I lived in a world that included oxygen and trees, but to each his own. Now, I have nothing against comic books. I read them now and then I read them now and then when I was a kid, and I was all out of Hardy Boys. But the assumption everyone had back then, both the adults and the kids, was that comics were for kids. And when you grew up, you moved on to big boy books without the pictures. So that's a little bit of what he wrote. So, first of all, I don't like how he had the assumption of how even now, like, the assumption everyone had back then, both adults and kids, was that comic books were for kids. Why are you assuming that that's what everybody thinks?
Right.
Because that's what you think? So it's just stuff like that. That was just the beginning of it. He went in and said a lot of things. So if you guys are interested in reading that, check it out. But it was just... Yeah, we'll put the link in the description box.
Yeah.
But I don't want to focus on like the negative stuff that he said. I do want to read a little bit of Stanley's team actually did like an open letter to Bill Maher, and I kind of just to kind of close this off, kind of want to read it to you guys. So they said, Mr. Mayor, comic books, like all literature, are storytelling devices. When written well by great creators such as Stan Lee, they make us feel, make us think, and teach us lessons that hopefully make us better human beings. One lesson Stan taught so many of us was tolerance and respect. And thanks to that message, we are grateful that we can say you have the right to your... And thanks to the message, we are grateful that we can say you have the right to your opinion that comics are childish and unsophisticated. Many said that same about Dickens, Steinbeck, Melville, and even Shakespeare. But to say that Stan merely inspired people to watch a movie is, in our opinion, frankly disgusting. Countless people can attest to how Stan inspired them to read, taught them that the world is not made up of absolutes, that heroes can have flaws, and even villains can show humanity within their souls. He gave us the X-Men, Black Panther, Spider-Man, and many other heroes and stories that offered hope to those who felt different and bullied, while inspiring countless to be creative and dream of great things to come. These are but a few of the things we, the fans of Stan Lee, also consider adulting, because life, both as a child and grown-up, can indeed be a struggle. Stan is the author of millions of happy childhood memories and the provider of so many of the positive tools of adulthood. Our shock at your comments make us want to say, "Nuff said, Bill," but instead we rely on another of Stan Lee's lessons to remind you that you have a powerful platform. So please remember, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And that kind of like...
Clap back.
That was like such a good clap back because it's so true. There's so many lessons that one can take from comics, you know? Like, when I was a teenager, I wasn't very confident in the things that I was interested in. And I was kind of ashamed. Like, not ashamed, but I was embarrassed. Like, people don't want to know that I'm into this stuff. But it did help me to know that everyone is different. You know? Like, why am I ashamed of my interest in the things that I'm into? Because people like Bill Mayer, who I don't know, maybe never had a childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's old enough not to have a childhood.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the same too, like when our previous podcast, when people assume that their problem is more important than another person's problem.
Yeah.
It's like saying that like comics could be something, an entertainment for people to cope mechanism or to, you know, not to entertain their life, but like to get through life.
Right.
And that's also to say to music too.
Right.
Music could be like something that people constantly listen to, you know, to get through your daily life. But it's not to say that it's better than music or music is more important than comics. It's like, yeah, to each your own, whatever it's gonna you need to get through your daily life.
Something just to help you escape.
Yeah, and it's just very ignorant to like, you know, say that like something so simple like a comic is not as important. It's like, let's pay attention to the real world. Well, you know what? The real world is already shit. So, like, you know, it's already filled with negativity and stuff. And like, you know, you need like another world to escape fucking reality.
I think, comic books are just another form of escapism or entertainment. So to belittle it is not nice.
Right.
Yeah, one of the great things about comics is that it shows so much diversity, you know, and the type of people and also like the different situations that they come from. And it's one of those mediums where, you know, you can really write anything you want. And it's, you know, it's in the comic area and that's anyone can read it. It's not, I mean, not saying that it's not difficult, but it's not as challenging maybe like for TV shows and for movies that want to display certain types of themes or situations, and it might get a lot of pushback. But I feel like the comic community, people are so open to different things and learning about different things and different situations, whereas like, you know, mental illnesses or, you know, different situations and backgrounds people go through, that people want to like kind of flock over to comic books to kind of understand that and like be able to relate to it more.
Right.
And so what if it has pictures?
Right.
We love pictures.
Right.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
pictures, damn it.
As far as I know, we all like visuals.
Yeah.
Seriously.
That's why I didn't even like really go into like a lot of the things that he said, because it
Yeah.
just pissed me off and it's not worth talking about right now because bitch, leave the negativity outside the door.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's a very privileged point of view about it.
Yeah.
That too, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, we just wanted to share that with you guys, and that was the whole reason why I kind of decided maybe we should talk about comics. But I guess, like we said before, it can definitely be, there can be another conversation about it if you guys want to listen to that. There's just so much we can talk about when it comes to comic
We
books.
can talk about specific topics. Like
Yeah.
one topic can probably, you know, last for a long time.
Like how you brought up the diversity. That's something that's
Yeah.
huge in comic books too.
But
So-
yeah, this was a great conversation, and you know, it's very interesting, like that we can talk about like different things. You know, we're not just talking about positivity and like life things.
Yeah.
We can also talk about comics. And,
Yeah,
like,
we have our nerdy side, you know.
I feel more knowledgeable.
yeah.
We'll start burn off with fables.
I'll try it.
Maybe Saga.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. And we'll keep you updated what Bernadette thinks.
But yeah, as usual, you guys make sure you hit the like button and subscribe.
Yeah.
Comment below.
Comment below.
Comment below. Yeah, what's your favorite comic book, you know? Let us know. You have any recommendations for us?
In the description, we'll put that link, and we'll also put, where Angie and Vivian, what they like to read, and where they go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
All right, bro.
Yeah.
All right, thanks,
anyway,
guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening, you guys, and we'll see you on our next podcast.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
We'd like to say thank you to Vivian.
Oh, man.
Oh, no, it's good, you guys.